Hello and welcome to the Mastering EQ workshop. So first things to do is to make sure that everything is working correctly. So if you can see and hear me, please drop a comment into the chat to the right hand side of the video saying where you're from around the world, just to keep it interesting rather than just hello, we can see you. I'm also going to click across to YouTube and make sure that I can see myself. So yeah, if you guys can just confirm that the audio is working as anticipated, that would be really helpful. Thank you. And yeah, let me tell you a little bit about this. So this workshop is intended to show just how powerful EQ is. I can see a few comments coming in. Let me make sure they don't say, oh, cool. You got somebody in the Philippines, Vadwan Badua, I probably mangled that. Andy Carney in Wales, Brian Zink in Tampa, Florida, Kane in Akron, Ohio. Excellent. Thank you all. Mark from Switzerland. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. I really appreciate you supporting the event. If you would like to share the link to the YouTube video so that other people can take a look at this, if you think they would be interested, that would be very cool as well. In fact, probably I should tell you what the event is going to be first, so that you know whether or not they might be interested. So EQ is one of the most, possibly the most powerful tool in mastering, I would say. A tiny mismatch or a tiny imperfection in EQ can make the difference between a song working and not working. I shared with my email list recently the story of, I had a long-term client who I'd done 3 or 4 albums for, really upset. He hadn't been able to attend the session. He was abroad. I sent the master off online. He took a listen and he was distraught. He was like, something's gone wrong, that my vocal sound is ruined. And this is not the kind of thing you want to hear as a mastering engineer. So I pulled up his master. I thought, well, it sounds pretty good to me. But then so I brought in one of the previous projects that I'd done, one of his favorites, and compared that with the new project. And listening for a while, I just picked out there was something slightly edgy, slightly brittle about his voice in the new master that wasn't there in the old master. And that was all I could pick up on in terms of the vocal sound. Everything else just seemed absolutely fine to me. So I went in, and from memory, it was something like a 1.5 dB cut at something like 3 kilohertz. I don't remember exactly what the frequency was. And I made this change, and I thought, well, I don't want to go any further than that because it's going to take away, it's going to sound weird. It's going to mess up the high frequency energy in the voice. But I sent him a track and saying, how's this? Does this feel any better? And the reply came back, oh, thank goodness for that. You're a lifesaver. You're a miracle worker. You've rescued it. And it's, I'm laughing, but it really was that serious to him. Artists know the sound of their own voice. They know what they expect to sound. And, we looked into it and decided, I think maybe he changed his mic, or maybe it was the room that he was recording it. Something had changed somewhat in his setup. And I wasn't so finely tuned into the details of his voice as to pick up on this particular detail. I was doing the mastering thing. I was looking at the big picture, balance from song to song, overall EQ. And yeah, this tiny little change made all the difference for him. And another favorite anecdote of mine is, I was doing a master, I think it's somewhere maybe on a YouTube video somewhere. And I just was listening to it and going, well, I think that's about as good as I'm going to get this. But, it's just not, the snare seems to be pulling everything back a little bit to me. And I thought, I wonder, and I went in with, again, from memory, it was maybe sort of 200, 250 hertz, something like that, just a little notch, just to take out a little bit of kind of extra boom it wasn't really boom, that's too high for boom, but just that kind of thickness, that resonance in the snare. Pulled it out, and again, it was a change of a dB, maybe I think it was a dB, and it just transformed it. Suddenly, the whole thing opened up. The drum groove just lifted. It felt lighter. It felt more energetic. The song had this really nice bounce to it, and whenever that happens, it astonishes me that EQ can have such a powerful effect. So in this workshop, I'm going to use only EQ now, and I'm not claiming that this is a complete mastering session, right? It's the number of times when I have done masters using only EQ and very gentle limiting. many times in my career, but it's not the norm. Usually, especially these days, we're looking for a little bit of gentle compression, some other kind of dynamic management, and there may be other things going on. But 75 to 80% of the heavy lifting is done by the EQ, and that's the bit that I want to show you in this workshop. So I'll put my glasses back on and just say hello to a few more. Who else do we have here? Dougie in France, Rolf in Norway, someone anonymous in Arizona, Sebasticus from Halifax, Giuliano Video from Italy, Carl and Alison Positive Audio in Liverpool, Digi Do Good in Roseville, California, St. Clair Liberd in the Caribbean, Dave Chapman. Oh, thank you. He says, do some great courses. They've really helped him. And now, of course, everybody else is realizing that I'm doing more shout outs and piling in. Maybe I'll check back with more of you guys later on. So let me share my screen with you, for which I have to do this. There we go. And hopefully now you guys should be able to see. Oh, in fact, let me just go back to double check that you can see that. Yeah, that's good. So you can see Wavelab. And then the next thing to do is hopefully the audio will be in stereo. Every so often it doesn't quite work, especially when I've messed around with the settings, but hopefully it will be. So I'll just play you some audio and make sure you can hear that. That's coming through. I'll just flick back and maybe see if somebody can confirm that for me. I have found a way of getting rid of the infinite tunnel of doom here when I'm sharing my screen, but I guess that's not the end of the world. So somebody says, great. Okay, I'll keep going. Tell me if it's not working. So I'll just give you a quick overview of the songs in the playlist. So we have the song I just played you, a kind of cool housey thing. Then we have by Richard Durrant, who is a long-term client of mine. It's actually, he released it back in, I forget, the 90s and wants to reissue it now. He's actually, you can see, he's done his own EQ'd version for me potentially to compare with. That might be interesting. But he was interested to get my take on it. So you can hear that's kind of cool, proggy, guitar, rock, something, folky, something. Then we have... Disconnected before my eyes, I didn't expect it. Vintage kind of sound there, authentic, classic sound. You can see how loud this song is. I'm not even going to play it at that level. Let's start with it quiet and turn it up. Then we have I believe this is a rock tune. Can't promise to get through all of these. I'm going to do as many as I can. We'll see how we get on. Then this is called Deep Blue. This. And then the last one we have here. Dance, kind of quite dark. So you can hear there's a huge range, there's a huge variety there. Let me just check back in the comments and make sure that, oh, my screen's gone to sleep. Nobody is telling me there's any technical problems that I need to take care of. No, excellent. It's stereo, says Mark. Thank you. Brilliant. Yeah, huge variety of songs. I mean, you know, this could be the most bizarre compilation album in the history of the world ever. I've deliberately, I had a ton of submissions, so I'm sorry if your track isn't here. That doesn't mean I won't ask you if I can use it for something in future, maybe. But I wanted to choose a variety of genres, and I wanted, you know, some of the stuff that came in already sounded very, very good in terms of the EQ. That's not going to make the most interesting example for you guys. So I wanted also to get some variety in sound, but it gives you an idea. You know, just imagine this was a film soundtrack, which is the kind of thing, or this is just going to be a playlist, you know, all of these songs have been playlisted by somebody with very eclectic tastes, and your goal is to make your track fit as well as it can in terms of its genre with everything else. As it stands, those tracks are not balanced in terms of EQ. So I'm just going to work through each one and show you the kind of EQ moves that I would make. And I should say straight up, of course, usually I'm working into a compressor, and that influences the EQ that you can apply. You know, one of the nice things about working into a compressor is you can push EQ moves harder. The compressor just works against it slightly, so you can kind of glue things together. You get extra power when you add in a compressor into the mix, especially if you use a multiband compressor, which I like to do quite often. That's not going to be part of this demonstration. This is all about EQ and the power of EQ. But even so, I hope you're going to be surprised by what we can achieve. The next thing, I mean, you noticed I turned the metal tune down. The other important thing, you know, this is not really just EQ, because it's EQ and level. The two go hand in hand. The louder you make something, the brighter and bassier it sounds. So changing the level changes what we feel is the perfect EQ. And you'll see me, as I start EQing these, I will start also tweaking the levels. They're not full mastering level. Let's just choose something. 13 LUFS. I mean, that's a good, healthy level. You know, that's still going to get turned down by a dB by most of the streaming services. But I would probably master that song quite a lot louder. That's because, I do have a limiter on the master output section here, but I don't really want it to be doing anything. It's just there to catch the peaks. And then the final thing to tell you is that if you haven't seen me working before, this is Wavelab. It's my favorite mastering DAW. And by the way, I'll check back with the comments every so often and just see if there's any questions. So if you have a question about something I'm saying or doing, feel free to drop it in the comments and I'll try and answer at least some of those. So the nice thing about Wavelab is, well, I'll show you. Here, this first song here, you can see I've reduced the level from as it was supplied by 3.5 dB, just because I've got quite a few tracks that was quieter to begin with. So rather than push everything up into a limiter, which adds extra complication into the mix, I want to keep this focused about EQ. I want to be able to say to you, the changes you're hearing here are only down to EQ. So rather than push the levels up, I've pulled the louder stuff down. So yeah, I've given myself 3.5 dB of headroom on this kind of housey tune that we're starting with. And what I'm going to do is, so I can select the clip, and then up here in the inspector, I can just add an instance of, I'm going to use FabFilter Pro Q3. Any EQ will do. Wavelab has an excellent built-in EQ that does a great job. You could use something like Tokyo Dawn Nova EQ. There's a free version of that that's remarkably powerful for the price. You know, the channel EQ in Logic. You can work in Pro Tools. You can do this stuff in any DAW. There's nothing special about what I'm using here. FabFilter has a really nice interface, and it has a few kind of features that I'm particularly fond of, and that make it really nice for demonstrating. So that's my reason for choosing it. And yes, so I've added it to this first song here, which, by the way, is called Find Your Frequency and was sent in by Liam. So thanks to everybody who sent in their songs for me to use as guinea pigs this evening. And I've put that Pro Q instance onto that song, but not yet onto any of the others. So if you're DAW, I think you can do this in Reaper from memory, and you can do it in some others. You can drag the effect directly onto a clip in the timeline. And this is how I like to work in mastering, is to have all the stereo files lined up in a sequence, so that I can quickly skip between them, and I can have separate settings for each. But if your DAW doesn't let you do that, then you can line each song up on its own channel in the mixer, and then just have separate EQ settings and processing settings in general on each channel, and that would achieve the same result. So I'm going to take a listen to this. The first thing that I notice when I play this song very big low end. It's nice, but I think maybe it might be a little bit too much. So I'm going to go in and experiment with reducing some of that. Done that, that immediately doesn't sound as big and as loud to me here, so I'm actually going to ease the level back up because I've increased my monitor gain from my standard monitoring level so that things sound loud enough in the room even though I'm not pushing the levels super hard. So my goal is to get everything sounding right at the level of my monitor in here. I never touch that volume control. That bass, it's not that I think it's bad, it's just that knowing some of the other stuff that's in this playlist and thinking, okay, I want to try and make a compilation album out of these, or a film soundtrack, something where they're all going to flow together and feel like they're meant to be part of the same playlist or album, whatever, collection of songs. I think it would be too much to have all of that low end in there. So what's that? I've reduced that by 3 dB at 60 hertz thereabout with a kind of moderate Q. The other thing I think it might be nice to do is just open out the high frequencies a little bit. It's got a nice warm sound to it, but I maybe would like a little bit more life in the high frequencies. Let's try that. I don't know whether you guys heard that on the stream, but that to me is a perfect example of the power of something. I mean, so that second move was plus 1.6 dB at 4,160 hertz with a broad Q. That's a Q of 0.7. So that's getting right down to what, 1 kilohertz and tickling up into 12 kilohertz. Just those two tiny little moves, and when I bypass them, it completely changes the character of the track. It suddenly, to me, sounds, it's not moving as well. It doesn't have as much, and it's really nice to bring out those little rhythmic elements, the percussive elements in the high frequencies, and to just, with that bass boost in there, or with that extra bass in there on the kick drum especially, it almost feels like it's holding it back. By just lightening that slightly with that cut, I feel like it's helping. Let me do that again. Hopefully you guys can see when I enable and disable up here using the button up there in the top left of the display. With the EQ. It slows down when I disable that EQ. It's kind of dragging it back slightly. So for the moment, that's sounding pretty good. You know, it's a fairly straightforward song. I mean, I haven't played you guys the intro. Let's just. I'm happy with that for the time being. I'm not saying that's perfect, but I'm aware I want to try and get through as many songs as I can for you. We can always, that's the other nice thing about working like this, we can always come back to this song if we think it's not quite right. You might see I've just increased, so I've kept the frequency is the same, but I've reduced that cut from 3.5 to 2.5. It felt just a little bit, maybe it was lacking then a little bit, the lows in that intro. So let's leave that one for now, and we'll move on to Richard's song, and I will just pop in an instance of the Pro Q3 on there. So let's take a listen. I think you'll agree, it sounds lovely already. I have tweaked up the level there slightly, just because the song we're coming out of is quite loud, and I know we've got some loud stuff coming later on. The first thing that strikes me again is the low end. I'd like a little bit more depth and richness in the bass of this. So I'm going to skip forward to this louder section towards the end and just see what feels right. Hopefully you can hear that. I'm really pleased with that. That's adding the richness and the depth that I wanted to the low end. And then I have a saying, I like to think that EQ is a little bit like, I think it's Newton's third law of motion. Is it for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, and for every EQ move there's an equal and opposite EQ move? You know, you boost the bass and it feels like maybe there's not as much in the way of highs. You boost the highs and it feels like maybe there's not enough bass. So in this case, overall, I think the track sounded lovely. It's got beautiful mids. I love all the guitar and the organ in there and all that stuff. But especially in comparison to some of the bassier stuff on there, I think it benefits from having that bottom octave being supported there. And I've done two bass lifts there. So I've got plus 3.6 at 38 hertz with a fairly broad Q. That's Q of 1.2. And then above that, I've got another boost. That's at 100 hertz, give or take, plus 1.3 dB with Q of 1. So that's broader. So those two kind of interact together to, but it's a very different shape than, say, going in just with a low shelf. And then that other lift in the high frequencies I did, that's plus 1.3 dB at 6.6 kilohertz. And again, I feel like the difference is big when you bypass it. I hope it's coming across on the stream there. And I'm just going to try and demonstrate, just even before we go any further, but just with these two songs, if I've got Perception, my Perception plugin in here. I'm not doing any level matching. We'll leave that to our ears, or my ears, for the time being. But just if I just switch that to pre, so that we hear these without the EQ. So here's how these two songs relate without those EQ moves. The EQ moves back in. They balance so much better, you know, and that makes sense because you've got a bass increase on this second track and you've got a bass decrease on the previous track. And even though, I mean, some engineers, mastering engineers will tell you I only ever do 1 or 2 dB moves. I am happy to be a little bolder than that if necessary. You know, I mean, it's whatever's necessary. In an ideal world, you make hardly any changes at all. But especially when you're combining lots of very different songs and trying to make them fit together, you know, we can't necessarily go with the theoretical approach. We have to do what sounds right for the music. So, you know, in that general, so what that boost was at 37 and this one was at, this was a cut at 60. Well, that's, so it's, whereas, but this other song has got a boost also at 100. So, you know, that 60 hertz region, there is, what do we got? 2 or 3 dBs difference there. And so between the two of them, there's actually 5 to 6 dB difference in that crucial frequency range. So, and this is an example of one of the things that I love about mastering, which is that these small changes over a whole group of tracks add up into being something much, much more significant. So let's carry on. I do have Richard's EQ'd version there. I'm going to save that if we have time, because I don't want to. I want to focus on just EQing these different examples and don't want to miss out on anything else. So let's take a listen to. So that was called Wilbury Summer by Richard Durrant. I mean, you can hear fantastic guitarist, fantastic musician, based out of near Brighton somewhere. Going on tour this week. Please check out his website, please, and that song will be re-released, I believe, at Midsummer with either Richard's EQ or my EQ, depending on which one he prefers. Yeah, do check that out if you like. Next, we have Pick Up the Pieces, which has been sent in by Paul McMahon. I believe it is a remaster of, I'm not sure whether it was Paul who did the mastering or whether that's the artist or whether they're both the same. Apologies, Paul. I've read a lot of emails today and I'm losing track of the stories behind these songs. But let me just, let's take a listen.
Pick up the pieces, put them in a jar. Pick up the pieces of your broken heart. Pick up the pieces.
The song sounds a little bit quiet, I would say, sorry, a little bit loud in context, so I'm going to pull that back slightly. First thing that I hear is that there is less high frequency content in it. It's a nice, warm, you know, kind of classic sound, authentic sound, but I think in comparison with some of the other bright stuff, I think I would add some top to that, even if I were just mastering a whole album of this kind of material where it was much more consistent. Whether I would do quite as much as I'm about to try, I don't know. But well, let's see what sounds right.
I disrespected your warning sign. You would text me back when I texted you. pick up the pieces, put them in a jar.
I'm going to use one of my favorite tricks. I'm going to dim the entire thing by 12 dB, which is a 12 dB gain. I normally use the dim button, but then you wouldn't hear it. So I'm doing it in the master section in Wavelab here. And I'm going to compare those at low level to see how they sit.
Put 'em in a jar, pick up the pieces, pick up the pieces of your broken heart. Pick up the pieces, put 'em in a jar. Pick up the pieces. Pick up the pieces.
Really real, kind of authentic feel to this song. It's a real nice kind of, I mean, it's not a punk song, but there's a slightly punk ethos about it, maybe. It's just like, it's real.
I was surprised, I disrespected. Put 'em in a jar. Pick up the pieces, put 'em in a jar. Pick up the pieces, 'cause it's who you are.
This was the one, I think I remember Paul saying that there was some debate about whether or not this track had ended up with too much bass. And you'll notice that I've actually boost and cut the bass there. The first thing I did was boost down here at 35 Hertz, plus 3 dBs, with a Q of 1.8, so a narrowish Q. Then I went up and lifted the high, or no, I apologize, it was the high frequencies I did first, 10.4 kilohertz, 2 dBs extra, broad Q, 0.7 Q, that one there. Then I added the low boost. Then I went in listening at low level, just in comparison, particularly in comparison to the other two songs. I just felt like maybe it needed a little bit more presence in the upper mids to help the vocals come out, and to stop things kind of just make it feel more balanced. It gives make it a smoother transition there up into the high frequencies. So I added plus 1 dB at 4.6 kilohertz thereabouts with a Q of 0.5, so even broader. And then the very last thing that I did just then was a cut at 97 Hertz of 2 dB with a much narrower Q, 1.8. I felt like it was just sounding a bit thick in the bass. And so the interesting thing, the reason I'm kind of telling you all of that, is that when I was bypassing it there, see whether you agree with me, to me, even though there's a bass boost low down, overall, the bass clarifies, because this, I mean, it's nice, this kind of 100 Hertz warmth, but it was just thickening things up and muddying things a little bit, especially again in comparison. Of course, we've also got the high frequency lift that adds to the clarity. I'll just enable and disable that so you can see what I mean. These frequencies here, just disable that one so that you can hear the effect just of that frequency range. Opens out the sound there. It gives everything else a little bit more room to breathe in that kind of that frequency, range just gives a little bit more articulation to all of the parts, which I really like. And yeah, just skipping between the songs, I was feeling good about that. It's time to save, just because. I will pause now and go back and just check in the chat to see whether anybody, whether everybody's left. I can't see you guys when I'm working in Wavelab. What is this low volume 12 dB trick? Okay, so you guys can't see my screen. Wait, what happened? Okay. Share screen. I was sharing it. I didn't stop sharing it. What happened? Okay. Right, so I'll quickly review the EQ shapes. Here we go. This is what I ended up with on track 1. I apologize. I don't know why that happened. I must have clicked a button without meaning to. There you go. So we had a low cut and a high boost on the first song. In the second song, the low boost, then slightly higher up, that 100 hertz, broadening that out, and then the presence lift up at 6.6 kilohertz. And then on this one, there is the EQ shape that I was talking about. So I'm boosting down at 35. Now, there's not actually anything happening at 35 hertz, I should say. It's just that it's the top end of this EQ curve here, as it starts to get up into the 60, 100 region, boosting below it. If I boosted higher up, I'd end up with that boost going even higher up the frequency range. Let me just show you that. It would have looked more like that, and then I would have had to have made this cut even smaller, even bigger, excuse me, to compensate. So yeah, that's adjusting the wrong thing. There we go. That was down there, and that's a kind of. I was on Björgvin from Audio Issues live stream for he has an event yesterday called EQ Day. Some of you might have been there, and we were talking about the Pultec EQ trick of where you boost and cut at the same frequency. You end up with this kind of EQ shape. It actually turns out to be more on a Pultec. It's probably more like a low shelf with this cut above it. But being able to tune those gives that extra clarity in the bass that I was talking about. So apologies that you couldn't see my screen there. Let me go back and check a few more comments. There's a great exercise for all you guys listening to those EQ moves without being able to see them. I keep telling you guys you should be listening with your ears and not your eyes. So yep. Lots of people complaining about not being able to see the screen. I'm really sorry. Here we go. So I'll come back down to the bottom. Glad you can see it now. Yeah, the low 12 dB trick. Basically, I have one mastering level, which is and I master. So I'm talking about the monitor gain on my amp. Basically, I mean it's actually on my interface, but it's what's feeding the amp, and that is set so that when things are at the loudness that I like, that I'm happy with, as loud as I feel is comfortable to go, it will sound right to me in the room. And I never touch that volume control. So when I bring something else in as a reference, I will immediately hear, oh, it's mastered loud or it's mastered quiet. I mean, you can see it in the waveforms as well, but yeah, mastered loud, mastered quiet, whatever, you can hear it. And because you're always listening at the same level all the time, so I will adjust those reference tracks. I'll bring them down to the kind of loudness that I'm looking for if they're too loud, or I'll bring them up if they need to be louder. And that means that I'm not being fooled by the EQ differences. You know, I said when you turn things up, they sound bassier and treblier. This is a thing called the Fletcher-Munson curve, or the equal loudness curve, and it's something that happens in our brain. It doesn't change the sound, adjusting the volume level, but it changes the way we hear the sound and how we feel about the way that it sounds. So it's really important for me to get the loudness right. Of course, the two feed into each other. I mean, you saw with, or you didn't see, but you heard with the first song, I had adjusted the loudness, then I adjusted the EQ. I went in and made this cut here, and then I actually brought it up a little bit, because that the boom in that kick drum for that song was really influencing how loud the song felt. Having reduced that slightly, I was able to bring the overall level of the song up slightly. So there's a great example of how EQ and loudness interact. So I don't want to be fooled by that when I'm mastering. If I'm constantly changing my mastering gain, I'm never going to know whether what I'm hearing is a genuine EQ change or genuine benefit in the EQ, or just the result of having adjusted the monitor gain. So my monitor gain is fixed. I mean, occasionally, if I'm doing some classical, I might increase the monitor gain. If I'm doing something like this, where I'm deliberately mastering at a lower level, I might increase the monitoring gain. But generally, for most mainstream genres, that volume control stays the same. I master the loud sections to be consistent. That's my recommendation for loudness. I'm getting off the topic of EQ, but that's okay. If you get the loudest sections consistent and then balance everything else musically with it, that to me is the best strategy for choosing loudness when you're mastering. But the other thing that I have is the dim control, and the dim button on my interface happens to, or my controller happens to be set to 12 dB. So it's just, so I listen at those two levels. I listen loud for a long time, and then I will listen quiet for quite a lot of the time. And interestingly, I've noticed I will tend to make fine critical EQ decisions at full level often, and then I'll dim it, and then the loudness relationships of the songs might feel a little bit different to me, so I might then tweak the balance between them slightly. It just gives me a separate perspective, but it's another very familiar, controllable perspective. You know, it's not as radical as going and listening on another pair of speakers or just randomly choosing a volume control. It's always one of those two. And it's a habit I really recommend you guys get into. You know, it helps save your ears, and yeah, you hear more. So, next song. This was sent by Tim Dargs. I believe that's Dargs, how it would be pronounced. It's called Shine, and it's a metal tune. Let's take a listen. The thing that I notice about this very much is the very distinctive guitar tone. It's got a lot of low mids in those guitars, and I do think that's a creative decision. There were actually, I got this, Tim sent me 2 songs, I believe. I listened to the other one, and it didn't have that same guitar tone. I think for this, it's a little bit too much for me, but it's only really guitars. Now, the advantage we've got with this song is the guitars are panned out. And that means I have the opportunity to use a little bit of a trick. I'm going to use some mid-side EQ on this one. So I'm going to put in a band down. I'm going to come down and switch this to side only. And I'm going to experiment with taking some of that. I think it's giving a slightly hollow quality to those guitars. I don't want to remove that completely because it's part of the character, but I just think it's going to work even better maybe with, let's experiment. If I just, I'll solo up that band so you can hear what I'm talking about. that minus 12 dB trick again, because obviously balancing songs this different with each other is something of a judgment call. So I'm just going to see how it feels lower level. I mean, you can hear what's happening there. I'm not completely sold on that EQ yet. I'm just still experimenting, but I liked the fact that, I mean, you can see it was mastered very loud. It's got a much lower peak to loudness ratio than anything else. I mean, I've pulled the level back by 7 dB. What that means is I can add some extra low end weight into the kick and the bass guitar in there, which I personally like. I'm a bit of a bass head. You know, there is a style in metal to have very tight, very controlled, very dry bass. So, you know, quite possibly if Tim was here working with me, he'd be saying, no, man, it's meant to sound like that. So, you know, I can't know that for sure, but I'm just going with my instincts, and also, you know, compare in the context of everything else we've got on this compilation album. So yeah, let's try this minus 12 dB trick test. The thing I'd like is a bit more presence in those vocals, but yeah, let's see. Guitars sound harsh, so I need to switch my EQ to linear phase mode because I'm doing mid-side, otherwise I'll get weird phaseness happening. Probably have to tweak some of those settings. Should remember to do that first, my bad. But I'm also going to switch this to mid only for this vocal presence lift. I've gone too far. That's quite a dramatic change. Mind you, I need to listen to it in comparison to the others. Let's do some more flicking around. Those frequencies I'm taking out there in the sides, and of course it's not exclusively the sides. We have to be very careful with mid-side EQ because it's actually sum and difference. That's a whole other tangent there isn't time in this live stream for, but look on my podcast, the Mastering Show, for an episodes on stereo and mid-side with Ian Stewart, fantastic mastering engineer in Canada, I think. Or the US. That's okay, doesn't matter. So I'm gonna try putting some of that back in. Did you notice my expression change there? There was too little. I brought it up and suddenly those guitars started doing what they were meant to do again in terms of the weight. And then as I eased it up a little bit further, actually it started to get a bit oppressive and muddy and cloud things up. So now you can argue about whether this kind of change should be done in the mastering, right? Because ideally this would be a mix change. If Tim or the artist or whoever it was, if Tim isn't the artist, you know, agreed with me, in an ideal world, this is a change that we made in the mix. But as a demonstration of the power of EQ, you know, we're just working on stereo here. You know, you really can have a huge influence on things. So I think that makes my point quite well. If this was a real mastering project, I would be talking to Tim and saying, you know, what do you think of this? You know, do you agree with me? And making sure that he was happy with the changes. But I'm still not 100% sure on that song, but let's leave it for now and move on. We can always come back to it and tweak. Something that quite often happens to me when I'm working is, you know, I'll get something to be where I think it's good, move on to something else, come back to it and suddenly go, oh no, you know, and spot a problem and fix it. So let's see how that sits. I will quickly save and just head back to the chat briefly to... Tim's here. He loves what you're doing. Okay, great. That's always nice to hear. Shelby always wished we could dig her vocals out of this mix, and this is doing that so far. Excellent. Oh, well, I love it when my instincts agree with the artists. Sly says, will this stream be available after you've done? Love for the rest of the band to be able to hear your notes. Yes, well, assuming the tech works, there will be a replay of this at the same... How much compression am I? I'm not EQing into any compression right now. This is pure EQ. Let me just double check that. That might be tickling the limiter. Limiter, the peaks are at -4. This song has already been very heavily limited. Let's see if any of them are doing anything. Dynamics processing happening so far, pure EQ. Oh, Javier says, can I explain about the linear phase EQ? Why do I change it? So, well, very briefly. So analog EQ is what's called minimum phase. EQ works by phase delay or phase shifting different parts of the audio signal by different amounts to create the effects that we're looking for. So you not only, and that doesn't normally matter unless you run things in parallel. So if you have one thing and then you EQ, you have another copy of that same thing and you EQ it with a minimum phase EQ, the phase shift in the EQ'd version when combined with the non-EQ'd version could cause extra cancellation or effects that you maybe are not what you're looking for. So you need to be careful about it. In mid-side, the sum channel is mostly what's in the mono area of the signal, and the side signal is mostly what's at the edges of the signal. But anything that's panned in between, and even something that is panned only in the left or only in the right, it's complicated. No, I don't think I can explain it in the time we've got here, unfortunately. Dig out those episodes on the mastering show. I forget which ones they are, but if you search for Ian Stewart, go to themastering.show.com, search for Ian Stewart, you will find an episode where we talk about this in a lot of detail. And Ian's really good at explaining it, which is why I got him on as a guest. Basically phase linear EQ doesn't do that. It keeps the phase relationship of the EQ'd signal identical to the non-EQ'd signal, so it's much cleaner. Mid-side processing has this kind of smearing effect anyway. If you imagine a sound that's intended to be panned at 2 o'clock and we put EQ onto the side signal, right? So that's going to pull, let's say we boost the low end, that's going to pull the low end of that instrument out towards the edges of the signal more than anything higher up that's not affected by that EQ. So you've taken something that was panned in one place and you've got some of it panned in one place and some of it panned in another. So it's almost like you've kind of, I don't know, if you had a double bass, it's like no, that doesn't work. But it's you've twisted the image, the instrument in the stereo image, and that's why you need to be careful with this. Mid-side EQ is a real Spider-Man process. It's a real, with great power comes great responsibility. So the benefit needs to outweigh the problems. And let's say, Tim's there and saying that he likes what I'm doing, so that tells me I'm on the right track. It's not unrealistic. Maybe they don't have access to the original mix files, or maybe they don't have the budget to go back into the studio. I'm not saying actually Tim, but if a client doesn't have the budget, doesn't have the time, there's a bunch of different reasons why we might not be able to go back to the mix to tweak these things. So it's super powerful to have access to this kind of stuff at the mastering stage. Any other questions? Very ear opening. Yep, good. Okay, I will crack on with the next song. This is going to sound very different. Instantly, we needed more bass, more low end in comparison to everything else, but also I think for this song, for me, this style of track, you know, there is, if you think back to kind of, I guess this is late 80s, 90s style, straight ahead rock, melodic rock, you know, it's back then, bands like, I don't know, Boston and, you know, I guess maybe not the Eagles, it's less, anyway, there was a cleaner, again, clean, tight, dry, more mid-rangey, that sound. And I don't want to take away from any of that, but I think there's plenty of scope in this to have more energy in the bass guitar and the low end to really fill this out, make it feel big and rich, whilst keeping that authentic sound to it. And also in comparison to the other stuff that we've got in this playlist, if you like, or this compilation album, weirdness. So let's just keep listening to that. I think the other thing to say is this is the first song where I'm really missing compression. I would probably be using some gentle dynamics processing on the other songs, maybe not on that metal tune there, but this one definitely, we've got very spiky drums. I'd like to glue the whole thing together a little bit more. So in real life, I would be EQing this into effectively but like a bus compressor. I might cheat. We'll see. Okay, there's a very pingy upper mid thing happening on the snare in this song, so I'm gonna see if I can deal with that. Help with it. Superstar. That's what I thought. It's taken away too much. So what I'm going to try is I'm going to try cheating, because I said I wasn't going to use any compression at all. But of course, the FabFilter Pro Q has dynamic EQ. So I'm going to try and dial that in so that it doesn't always, you'll see, doesn't always do the cut.
It's dangerous looking down, down, down. All your friends said most likely to succeed. Success came so naturally. Our destiny that was set in stone. Now you're the queen sitting on the throne, baby. The Oscar awards like bowling pins, like your Beverly Hills mansion dim. Every tour sold out in a beat of a heart. And baby, the stars are shining on you. Superstars, superstars. I wonder what you are. Superstars, superstars. I wonder where you are. Superstars, superstars. I wonder.
That's kind of working. That's kind of the effect I want. It's not quite right. So this is one of those cases where maybe I'd be breaking out some other tools potentially. I'm not going to cheat. This is the EQ, mastering EQ workshop, not the sneaky dynamic compression. I mean, dynamic EQ, because it's a form of compression, right? I'm just compressing that one frequency range. It's kind of very surgical type, or almost like multiband EQ, multiband compression. I'll stick with pure EQ in this case, also because it's not quite. The FabFilter is good, but I don't quite have enough control over the attack and release there. I almost want to have a faster attack to take more of that transient out of that snare up there than it's doing. Actually, I might be able to tweak that. I've never dug into this in real detail. I'm not a huge fan of dynamic EQ generally. These are the kind of points where I start feeling like, once again, better to do a mix tweak. You know, better to just get some extra compression in there to control those transients in the drum bus of the song, maybe. But so we'll go with a straight EQ setting on this and move on to the next track.
The Oscar awards like bowling pins, like your Beverly Hills mansion dim. Every song you sang shot straight to the charts. Every tour sold out in a beat of a heart. And baby, the stars are shining on you. Superstars, superstars. I wonder what you are. Superstars, superstars. I wonder where you are. Star-studded dress, the casting Tinseltown.
And it may
Tinseltown.
back when I texted you.
Star-studded dress, the casting call.
So you heard there, that was using the dimmed level check again, and I've tweaked back the level of pick at the pieces slightly more, another half dB. It just, for the type of song, you know, it's another thing. You kind of got, you know, we've got big, expansive kind of housey stuff. There's this big, almost orchestral feel to Richard Durrant's song. Then huge kind of metal riffs, and this one, this big classic rock sound. So that kind of much more intimate feel to pick up the pieces, much more kind of small band, small space feel, which I really like for the character of the tune. In comparison to the others, it just sounded too loud, so I've eased it back. Well, let's check in. Let's do a save and check in with the chat just to see if there's any follow-ups on that. How are we doing for time? Getting there. People suggesting, I don't know about pulling back the drummer. I think the drums are about the right level, but I think you need to control them. Yeah, people agreeing about the compression. I would hammer him down on those hats. A lot of stereo frequency in the bass frequencies. Would you not sum or cut the sides here? Which song, Felix? I'll come back to that question. Haven't heard anything at the moment that's bothering me, but I'll take a listen. So, next song, Deep Blue. That Superstar was by Michael B. Young. And I'm aware that I have at least one person listening who is blind. So I need to call out those frequencies. So for that song, for Superstar, 50 hertz plus 4.3 dB with a Q of 1. 200 hertz plus 2 dB with a Q of 0.7. So broad boost there. So a similar overall EQ shape there to the one that I used on Pick Up the Pieces, was it? No, because that had the cut. Or maybe it was Richard's song. Yeah. So that kind of a big boost quite low down, probably lower than the actual frequencies, a lot of the frequencies are, and then a broader one a bit higher up but less, so you kind of get this wobbly shelf kind of result in a way. Then there was a presence lift up 6.7k plus 1.85 dB with a Q of 1, and then that cut. That was another thing I was going to mention. I had that cut lower down. I had it to sort of 1.8 or something, and it was helping with the guitars, but it wasn't really dealing with the snare and the kick in the way that I wanted. So the one with the frequency that I settled on was 3.2 kilohertz, minus 2 dB with a Q of 2.5. So that's, I think, the narrowest Q so far, just to edge out a little bit of that pingy snare sound. Okay, Deep Blue. Increased the gain, and the thing that I noticed even before I did that was we got a big boomy bass end on this, which I really like, but I think is going to be a little bit too much. A strategy I'm using, not extreme, but heavy cuts or heavy boosts to find the right kind of general frequency area, and then fine tune the amount of it. Overdo it so that you can hear what you're doing, and then find the actual appropriate adjustment. As I said, I'm a bass head. I mean, that low end is working really nicely. I really like that low stuff. So in some ways it seems a shame to tame it. But I think this is better. So I've got a cut there at 53 hertz, minus 2.9 dB, Q of 1.7, 1.8, and then a broad boost, Q of 0.7 again, plus 1.85 dB at 286 hertz, just to fill out those low mids and really keep that warmth balanced. Let's compare that to some of the other songs. Nice sounding tune.
Put 'em
is too loud. Take that back a bit.
Now the years went by and the sun has set on your Hollywood fame. It starts to dress.
Try the minus 10 dB trick. That one could stand a little bit more bass going back in. Let's just...
Days, baby.
That's all kind of working. They seem to sit together. So you saw right there, I tweaked up Superstar. Actually, did I? In the end, I experimented with tweaking it out. Maybe I ended up back where I was. I experimented with tweaking it and found a level I was happy with. And then just, you saw there, and that's another little strategy I use, is to listen to the thing that I'm working on and compare it to every other song in the album really quite rapidly. You know, I'm not really, there's not time to listen carefully. It's purely based on instinct to see how they fit together. And at the point, if you're ever doing that and it feels like everything's gone wrong and the entire album is sounding terrible, it means that the thing you're working on is not right because it's disagreeing with every other song on the album, whereas before you were happy with all of them flicking around. But that's kind of working. So good. Let's move on to the final song. Let me go back and see what... do a quick save. Oh, we don't need to. Let's check what that comment, see if Felix clarified. Felix is saying Superstar, a lot of stereo material in the bass frequencies. Would I not some... Okay, let's take a listen. No, I mean that was the side channel I was listening to there, and it's mainly mids, and it's because of the hard panned guitars. The whole thing sounds a little bit out of control because it needs a little bit more compression, needs a little bit more dynamic control. That song, you know, we're getting away with not using much on the other songs because a lot of them have already been mastered or, you know, had some dynamic processing applied to them. So no, I'm not concerned. And, you know, it's the kind of thing that people worry about with vinyl as well. But the reality is, even if this were going for vinyl, I wouldn't, you know, heavy tom hits in heavily panned tom hits can be an issue for vinyl cutting, but I would always leave that up to the cutting engineer because it all depends on the lathe and the material and the length of the site. There's so many factors in vinyl. If you're interested in that, watch out for a new video from me in the coming weeks or months. There's a very cool new plugin that enables us to dig into all of that vinyl complications. But yeah, I'm comfortable with that. So, final song. That last song was Deep Blue, sent in by Rick McArdle. And this is Breathing by Wunschmaschine, which I think is a fantastic name for a band.
Making on the fly, we improvise. Baby, tell me what you think about that. Breathe in and fall into your rhythm. Breathe in and fall into decision. Making on the fly, we improvise. Baby, tell me what you think about that. Breathe in and fall into your rhythm. Breathe in and fall into decision. Making on the fly, we improvise. Baby, tell me what you think about that. I can't buy within it.
Superstar, superstar.
Superstar, I want to push the low end more, but I don't think that would work. Yeah, it's one of the things about mastering is knowing when it's not worth chasing things anymore without digging out the compression and really going to town on that track. I mean, even then it might need a tweak to the mix, honestly, to get the result that I'm looking from it. But in this context and using for this demonstration, I'm not going to spend any more time trying to do that. Right now I'm listening to see how loud should this song breathing. How loud should it be in comparison to the others?
What you think about that?
Made me
This is about right, actually. So let's listen to the EQ.
And I can't stop it. And I can't stop laughing. Oh, I feel so be happening. And I can't really place it, but you sure got the face that makes me feel the outside. Will lose myself, I say no lie. Breathe in, I fall into your rhythm. Breathe in, I fall into decision. Laying on the fly, we improvise. Baby, tell me what you think about that. Breathe in, I fall into your rhythm. Breathe in, I fall into decision. Laying on the fly, we improvise. Baby, tell me what you think about that. Breathe in, I fall into your rhythm. Breathe in, I fall into decision. Making on the fly, we improvise. Baby, tell me what you think about that. Breathe in, I fall into your rhythm. Breathe in, I fall into.
It's one of those. Let me just check that. Here it is with the EQ. Oops, and then here it is without the EQ. with it again. No, that EQ boost there. So what did I do? I did +2 at 46 hertz with a Q of 1.4, which is narrow-ish. Then a presence lift, quite a broad one, Q of 0.7, 2 dB at 4.2 kilohertz. And I just paused that. I'm pretty sure that the biggest EQ boost, oh no, I did a +4, didn't I, on Superstar? But every other song, the biggest EQ boost has been +3, and most of them are in the +1, +2 range. And then I took out a little bit of 456 hertz, narrow Q again, 1.8 at with minus 1.4 dB. Just that vocal had some, in this song, had some build up. And again, Chris, the artist, might tell me that that is creative intent. So I'm just going with my instincts like I have on the other songs. But I think it works a little bit better opening it up. But yeah, just that, whatever it is, 2 dB at 46 just makes that bottom note sing. So doom, doom, doom. And it just makes it musically for me. And it's a tiny change. Song doesn't have what he's talking about in it. Let's try this bit.
Baby, tell me what you think about that. Breathe in and fall into your rhythm. Breathe in and fall into decision. Making on the fly, we amplify. Baby, tell me what you think about that. Breathe in and fall into your rhythm. Breathe in and fall into decision. Making on the fly, we amplify. Baby, tell me what you think about that.
I'm liking that. Okay, let's do the minus 10 dB. Working. I think we're getting there. I mean, this, you know, like I say, this is not real mastering because it's just EQ there, and I'm doing it fast. This is much faster than I would normally work. I wanted to cover a broad range of material. I wanted to show you a variety of strategies, but even so, I think there's a big improvement. And in a minute, I'm going to bypass all of those EQs and just show you how the songs fit together without the EQ, and then you can recompare it and see whether you agree with me that it's been an improvement. Before I do that, I want to say thank you for showing up for this live stream. I hope you found it interesting and useful. If you enjoyed it and you're not already signed up for one of my emails, you can head over to productionadvice.co.uk/register, drop your email box into the box there, and you will get notified when I put out YouTube videos or blog posts or podcast episodes with more of this kind of stuff. And if you're really interested, I have a course called Home Mastering EQ, which is like this, but way more. It's much more methodical. It's much more in depth. I go through each of the frequency bands, what I think they're valuable for, how to recognize them, different strategies for using them, my whole philosophy of using EQ in mastering. It's everything I can cram into a course to tell you about the way that I work with EQ in mastering. Again, there's a range of songs, range of genres. And yeah, there's a ton of people are taking the course and are really pleased with it. It's called Home Mastering EQ. And as to say thanks to you for watching, sticking with this live stream and not leaving when there was no picture, I would like to offer you a discount. You can get 40% off using the code HMEQ live at the checkout. So if you head over to homemastering.com/HMEQ, I'll put these, in fact, I could post them in the chat for you now. Why don't I do that? So yeah, if you're interested in this, it's homemastering.com/HMEQ for all the information on the course. www. Ooh, too many W's. There you go. And use code HMEQ live to get 40% discount. That is the biggest discount I have done on this. In fact, I don't normally discount this course at all. Trying something new here. Just, I hope you guys like it. There's a question there saying, do I plan to make my compilation available to all? No, I don't have permission to distribute these tracks. The best I can do is just skip around this playlist. I mean, I guess we could, it could be uploaded to Bandcamp if people wanted to do that, or put into a Spotify playlist. If the people whose songs I've mastered are watching this and are into that, then, by all means, let me know. We could think about seeing what we can do. But yeah, if you would like more of this kind of stuff, Home Mastering EQ is the course for you. It's at homemastering.com/HMEQ. Use the code HMEQ live to get 40% off. That's a good chunky discount, hopefully, for you. And now let's, I tell you what, let's just see if there's any questions before I do the final comparison. Gary says, thank you. He already has the course. That's good. I hope you weren't too bored by this demonstration. Rico, Deep Blue says, you have my permission. Okay, great. No, there's no other... Slide says, still very impressed by what only EQ can do to make so many different types of songs, not only make them sound better, but also make them not jarringly different, to hear them adjacent to each other, which is the whole thing about mastering, right? That's the goal of mastering. Sinclair says, so in summary, when working on an album EP, the goal is not only to enhance and rectify when possible, to bring a balance of frequencies across all the tracks. Yeah, I would say so. But I think I think it's important to say that the balance is the important word, and balance is different from matching, right? We're not trying to make, we haven't made all of these songs sound like each other, and that's not the goal. But we're kind of recognizing and understanding what makes each of them unique, the character of each of them, and bringing them closer to each other. So, the metal tune has much bigger, meatier low mids and in those guitar sounds than any other, even after using that EQ to control them somewhat. The low end on the blues and house tune is still bigger than the other songs. So it's about, it's about mastering is about finding a kind of a center of gravity, if you like, a through line. I like to think of it. So, and making all the songs fit together into a cohesive whole. And of course, in this case, I'm using these songs as an example. But in my experience, they will translate fantastically well out there in the world. If we did make a playlist of these, put them on Spotify, and then you mixed and matched them with other stuff out there, in my experience, I have a really high level of confidence they will stand up well against everything else, with the exception that we would need to do a little bit of dynamic work on some of them in particular. But yeah, that's the goal. Translation, consistency, musicality. Maybe musicality, translation, consistency. Anyway, those three. There's probably others, but that's not a bad summary of the situation. So let's do this final comparison. I'll play a bit of each song, then I'll disable all the EQ, play a bit of each song, and then re-enable it so you can hear the difference. So here we are with the EQs that I've chosen, for better or worse.
I'll play
then I'll just put perception onto pre. So now we're hearing all of them with the level tweaks, because the level tweaks come in the Wavelab workflow. They come prior to, we have an instance of perception, a pre-instance on each of these songs. So it will take out the EQ, but not the level changes. So you're still, so it is just how these would sound if we hadn't made these EQ changes. Let's see what kind of impression they give now.
Baby, tell me what you think about that. Breathe in, I'm falling to your rhythm. Breathe in, I'm falling to your vision. Making up the body I'm providing.
So I don't know about you. None of them sounded bad. But in particular, I mean, there was a big difference between Wilbury Summer and, did I get the name of that right? Yeah, Wilbury Summer and Find Your Frequency. You know, that big bass end on Find Your Frequency, Wilbury Summer sounded distinctly underwhelming in comparison after that. Pick Up the Pieces kind of worked because it was also a bit middly and a bit small, but I mean, the contrast between those will be huge. That's musically appropriate, but with the EQ back in, it's less jarring, I think. Then the metal tune sounded very thick and dense. Superstar sounded very thin and bright. Contrast, we put the EQ in, and then we have difference, but less of a problem. You know, I mean, probably wouldn't put those two next to each other in the running order if we were sequencing this compilation. But you know, it helps. It's a big difference only through EQ. And then Deep Blue, yeah, that big booming bass came back with the EQ disabled. Contrast with Superstar. That was with the EQ. If we disable it, in and yeah, Breathing by Wunsch Machine just sounded really kind of big and meaty. Thick and a bit slightly congested, you know. I like the way that the sound opens out with the EQ changes we put in on there. Yeah, reducing that resonant frequency in the vocals there and just lifting out that presence really helped. So one more pass through with the EQ enabled. There you go. I hope that was helpful or interesting. Thanks so much for watching the live stream. Please share it with anybody else who you think might be interested, and let them know about the special offer on Home Mastering EQ, my course. That's going to run from a week from today, so it will end, it's not quite Friday here yet, but it's going to be soon, so it'll run Friday to Friday. If you want to get hold of that discount, if you want to give it a try, there is a money-back guarantee on the course if you find that it's not what you were hoping for. But if you've stuck it this far in the live stream, I'm really confident you will find it useful and helpful. Thanks again to everybody who sent in songs. If I wasn't able to use your example, then I'm sorry, but obviously we have limited time. And yeah, thank you to those brave souls who lent us their material to demonstrate with. And apologies for the missing screen in the early stage of that demonstration. I don't know how that happened, but hopefully it didn't distress you guys too much. Just checking the comments here. Will there be a part 2 using dynamics in mastering stream? Maybe. We'll see. Yep. Lots of people saying thank you. That's great. Thanks, everybody. See you again another time, perhaps. Thanks for listening.